Good afternoon and welcome to another Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. Luke Taylor here, and I am excited to say I've got gas. I don't have that kind of gas, I've got Argon gas. We're extremely effective and affordable wine preserver. We are excited to partner with Silvadore Brands as the official wine preserver of the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. Open whatever you want, whenever you want. 100% Argon Silvadore Wine Preserver allows you to do just that. Go to silvadorebrands.com and click the For Your Home to order. When checking out, enter Cork and Taylor in the discount code and receive 10% off your entire order. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and review all the podcast platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. This guy's got a really good Instagram page. So we've got the next NHL sensation. We've got a gentleman from Washington, D.C. He's a Master Somm, one of the youngest Master Somms, second African-American Master Somms. You're on CNN. You play hockey. You're CEO. And I mean, I'm impressed that you've even given me 5 minutes to talk to me.
I play a person who plays hockey on television.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. That was pretty funty. So we got Carlton McCoy. Thanks for joining the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast at historic and lovely Heitz Cellars.
Yeah. This is it's a historic estate, but this is the sort of the new, completely renovated hospitality salon for Heitz, which is cool that we with COVID and everything we actually got it open.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was a battle.
Yeah, that's a battle. The 5-letter word we try not to say on the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. So you, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. You have such an interesting background. You are a trained chef, and you you learned from your grandma.
Yeah, she was my first mentor in the kitchen, if you will. I grew up in a really, really large family in DC, so whether I was at my grandmother's house or one of her sisters, one of my great aunt's homes, there was always food on the stove, and I was one of these weird kids where, with the exception of basketball, I love playing basketball. I didn't spend a lot of time outside just running around. I spent a lot of time in the kitchen with my grandmother and her sisters. I was a pudgy kid. I loved to eat.
I'm still a pudgy kid. What you're talking about.
So I love to cook, and
right.
That was for me. It became one of my passions. Long before I even knew what the word chef was, it was just something I loved to do with my family, and it turned out to be something that I could actually create a career from.
Do you still cook?
Almost every night when I'm home. Yeah. I love it.
What's your go-to?
I don't necessarily have a go-to. What I'll say is that when I travel to places around the world, and I taste the food and I learn about these sort of ingredients, I get really fixated on it. So I come home and I'm constantly trying to cook that cuisine, because every cuisine, we're blessed to have access to ingredients in America from pretty much all over the world.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And so I get really fixated. So my girlfriend has to suffer through eating that same cuisine for like weeks until I'm sort of over it, and then it's like the next thing, like I went to Cambodia.
With that? What, you don't want some more Greek food?
Yeah, I came home and I'm like, I just want to I want to cook Cambodian food. I'm just trying to get all the ingredients to make Cambodian food. I get really fixated on it.
Yeah.
Because that's the interesting part to me, is every cuisine, you sort of taste it. It has a profile, it's an identity. You try to nail that identity in the food. We just came back from Japan, and I've been blessed to spend a lot of time in Japan. But I spent this time with my girlfriend's mom and her family. So I really got to taste a lot of authentic home cooking, which is different than the food you get in restaurants. I came back, and literally for 2 weeks, every single night, I was trying to nail these very key Japanese dishes. And my girlfriend's like, "Look, we just spent 2 weeks in Japan. I don't want that again." But for me, it's how you connect with people's culture and history through food. It's the best way.
Yeah. It absolutely is. Yeah. It absolutely is. What was the best advice your grandma ever gave you? She probably gave you some interesting advice, because I feel like when people cook together, especially when it's you and your mom, or you and your dad, or you and your grandparents, or whoever it is, there's just conversations you don't usually ever have that happen over cooking.
Sure. I mean, my grandmother came from a different generation. She was born in 1938 in a time was very difficult being an African-American woman. And she really, really believed it. She sort of had that, what we sort of, I guess, generally say sort of the immigrant mentality of a focus on education. So for her, it was really about how important education was and how education is the primary tool to sort of lifting people out of poverty and how important it was. She put a huge emphasis on it. My grandmother didn't talk a lot. She was a very hardworking woman, took care of our family. She helped take care of other people's family, just sort of a very nourishing person. But a lot of it was really focused on, hard work, education. It really was like sort of like an immigrant household in that sense. Like she worked very hard. So it was
like what you saw her as that was the advice you got. What she did, she lived it. Like she
did. It was she worked endlessly. She slept very little. She took care of everyone around her. She fed everyone. She was that person who was a provider and a nourisher, but again, she was sort of a no BS human being. Like, it was just, she just didn't fool around. I didn't see her laugh a whole lot. Like she was a pretty tough woman. Which again, you had to be in that era, being a black woman and being raised in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So, she really focused on her family and making sure everyone had enough and taking care of people. That was it. And working very, very hard and educating herself. My grandmother got her doctorate in theology in her late 50s because that was the point where she could pick that back up in her life.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was about learning and bettering herself. She really believed in that.
That's awesome.
And that's something that I took with me and I continue to do. It's I have a sort of insatiable appetite for like learning, because you just never know. I mean, I started in wine through just connecting with sommeliers in restaurants where I was cooking, right? So I wouldn't be here if I didn't carry that sort of principle of always trying to learn something new. Yeah.
Was there a wine that kind of just got you where like, man, I could do this for a living?
I'd say I didn't have, there was no epiphany wine, but there were certain experiences that I really vividly remember. And one was when I was at Per Se, and there was a young sommelier there, and he had just made the Somm team, so he was not yet jaded and was very enthusiastic about education and so forth. And he would do these wine classes, and I would go, and then he saw that I was really interested. That was actually my first real sort of front of the house position. And after service, once in a while, he'd say, they'd have like, the dregs in the bottom of the bottle, or the guest left a little bit in the decanter. He'd like, hey, taste this. Yeah. And I remember tasting Timpier Bandol from like the 90s. Yeah. I don't remember which vineyard it was, or, which Climat it was, but I remember tasting and going, whoa, like that was crazy. And it was the first time I recognized wine as being delicious, because I built up, I acquired the appetite for wine at that point where I actually liked it. It takes a while because wine is acidic, it's tannic. Yep. It doesn't have the things that like soda has,
absolutely.
Where it's like appealing to drink. It's not sweet,
right.
So you have to build up an appetite where you actually like that. And in, Bandol is ripe enough, but it has acid, it has tannin. Mm-hmm. And, fast forward years later, I was working with Andy Myers in DC, who's, I think, just a really fantastic personality in the wine industry, great educator, and mentored a lot of young sommeliers in DC. And he was really, really ahead of the curve in the infatuation with Chenin Blanc and Loire Chenin Blanc. So we had a lot on the wine list. and part of it was because the pedigree was so high and they were so cheap that you could have them on pairings, and they're so food friendly. And it was before most people in America knew the word Chenin Blanc. And he used to have these like off-dry, like demi-sec Vouvrays and things like that. And he would do these experiments where he would open a bottle and keep it open for weeks. And we would taste like an ounce or two every single night. And until we sort of felt that it was starting to go downhill. And we realized that Chenin Blanc actually got better like after like day 4 of just being open.
Really?
And it was crazy to me because it was this idea of, you think of alcohol, spirits. Mm-hmm. You open the bottle of vodka or whiskey, it just sort of is there. But this concept of wine being this like living, breathing thing was crazy to me. Mm-hmm. That you could keep something open for over a week. It's like you barely want to keep milk in your refrigerator for more than a few days. But you would taste this wine every day, and it got better, it got different. And some days we hit a slump where it wasn't as good, and then the next 2 days later it would be good. I just found that to me, it was very intriguing. I wanted to know like sort of why that happened.
Yeah. So what kind of made you start getting certifications in education in wine?
I didn't know any better, and it was it's true. Sometimes when you're young and someone goes, "Hey,
What
you should do
you
that."
got yourself into?
Well, yeah, I was just sort of. I first started studying for exams. I was 23. I was very young. I moved to DC and I was working for Andy, and Andy was studying for his certified level exam at the time. I didn't know what a Master Sommelier was. I had just learned the word sommelier, frankly, maybe a year and a half ago. So, and that's how Andy is. He would just sort of like, I was like, hey, look, I'd like to learn about wine. And he's sort of like cynical. He's like, yeah, you and everybody else, kid. Here are some books. Go read them. And if you still like, studying wine after that, then we can talk. Yeah. Because people always want the idea of just sitting around tasting wine. And that's a big part of it.
Right.
But studying the theory in the history of these regions, the geology, the wine laws that sort of create a wine style and why that's really the understanding of the wine culture of the region, the history of it. It's very important. And most people don't want to do that. And that's what really gives you understanding. It's the boring stuff. I loved it. And I love studying it. There was a Starbucks across from the Mandarin Oriental. And every day I went there and studied from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. To 2 p.m. every single day. And I went into work and I ran the cheese program. We had 40, 50 different cheeses. And I'd go in and do the cheese program. Then I'd have another hour and I'd study before pre-service. Right? Like I loved it. And back then we didn't have like the Guild Somm website. Right. I had a duffel bag with like 6 massive books in them. This is what you had to do.
You're getting stronger, both physically and mentally.
Sure. But that's what you had to do. And once, I think Andy saw that I was serious about it, then we started going down the path of, hey, look, I'm studying for these exams. So this is what these exams are. This is what a Master Sommelier is. If you want to do it, you can just sort of come along for the ride. We do these tasting groups 2-3 times a week. And we do study groups and everything. And you just come along. And I was like, well, what else was I doing? I was just, I was working in restaurants. It gave me a target and sort of kept me on a track. So I just jumped in. I was like, cool, that sounds great. I had no clue. You're so young, you don't realize that it actually absorbs your life. And it really does.
Do you think what you did then with the studying you could do now in your 30s?
No. I was very fortunate to have started very young. Why I say that is, I was not in, I was married. I still don't have kids, but there's no kids. I wasn't so far in my career that it required a ton of my life. I was a server. It was a job. Right? I was very committed to my work. I was the kid who worked off the clock because I loved what I did. I'd come in. Eric Zebal was a chef. He's a really fantastic chef. And I'd come in, and sometimes I'd come and work in the kitchen with him. I would, I loved the restaurant industry. I still love the restaurant industry, right? It's like,
hey, if you ever need a job, every restaurant in America is looking for somebody.
If I got another job, Maya would probably kick me out of the house. Yeah. But I loved it so much, but it was still a job, and I could take 4 to 6 hours out of a day to study. I could use my entire days off to study the entire days. I could never do that now. Oh. And so I understand when someone decides later on in life to go down this path. It's like it adds layers of difficulty that I didn't have. Yeah.
What was your least favorite part of the Master Somm exam?
By far, was service, because it was funny. What was the part to me that was not very realistic, in reference to how I interact with guests. I've always been a big believer, because I come from a very humble background. Is I recognize that most Americans are very uncomfortable with wine. Because on the surface, it's very intimidating. It's intimidating because it's very complex.
Well, you can't even pronounce some of these wines. That's for sure. That's the biggest problem.
To be honest, some of the French and Italians can't pronounce their own wines, right? It's like, it's this knowledge. It's so vast that I think that there is this irrational desire and expectation that people are going to completely understand wine, when wine professionals don't completely understand wine, right? It's like, so I always tried to lighten people's a mood and anxiety around wine and make it fun for them. That's not necessarily how you would sort of define classical formal wine service. So I really struggled with that because it was very unnatural to me. A blind tasting was my favorite part.
But can you just go back to the wine service. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine going to a restaurant and some person's giving you classical wine service? You're like, come on, dude. Like,
it happens. Come on. For me, I don't like that.
I think it would be weird for me. Yeah. Now, I mean, it's like,
I think some people who aren't in the wine industry, they really like it.
Yeah.
It's almost like you feel like royalty, and that's part of it. It's like making that person feel like royalty. And I think there's parts of the mechanics of it that people really love, but I think the dialogue and the way that you communicate with people, that I really struggle with, because I try to make people laugh.
Right.
My whole life, that's how I've broken up tension, is make people laugh.
Best way to do it.
Yeah, so I make people laugh.
Especially when you're in an argument with your significant other.
Oh, absolutely.
You laugh, but they don't.
Way, correct? They'll laugh later, maybe. But it's it's like you make fun of the French name.
Right.
You mispronounce it to make them feel comfortable. Things like that I always did, because it broke down that barrier where it was like, I can be professional in my work. I can be well studied and well experienced. But really my goal was to make the guests comfortable, make sure they had a good time, not intimidate them. That's difficult with formal service. So that was the part I struggled with. It actually was the only part that I ever failed.
I was going to ask you, that was the next question. How many times did you fail? I passed
theory in tasting the first go. I was young. I was 27. And I failed service miserably, like really, really bad.
Which is funny, because that's your background.
Oh, and it's what I love
to do. But we were
Yeah.
talking about, so that makes sense. I think Larry said he failed 3 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, people think it's like, I think I heard someone once tell me recently, or a year ago, that there's more astronauts in the United States than Master Somms.
Yeah, we've always said that's why they call it a Master Sommelier.
Yeah.
It's the level of understanding that you have to have about a whole lot of things. It's difficult. I think in some cases you need to be so mentally screwed up to even want to do it, especially after passing certified. And also, I will say, it's like the difference between the advanced level and the masters is about how much you want to challenge yourself. There's a big jump, I think, between a certified sommelier and an advanced level sommelier. But between advanced level and masters, it's more, in my opinion, people will probably disagree with me about this, but it's about your personal journey and about challenging yourself to hit that next, just slightly higher level. But as far as the level of knowledge, really, I think that if you can pass the advanced level, that's crazy. The advanced level exam is really, really, really difficult.
When you pass, what was that feeling like?
When I passed the masters?
You go in a room, right? You go in a room.
Yeah. You got to understand, I come from a place where it's very difficult, a very hard family with my grandmother. You don't celebrate yourself. You go, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Maybe it's a humility thing as well. I don't know. It's just, if you achieve something, it's like, oh, that's fantastic. Like, what's next? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
so I sort of went through
that.
that cycle, and I didn't really know how to feel about it. I remember the night of, obviously, you just go out with
when did it hit
your friends.
How about when did it hit you when you're like, oh, shit?
And actually, I'll backtrack is, I actually, the part about the week after I passed, Shane Bjornholm called me. And Shane is a really exceptional human being. He's also was the education director for the Court of Master Sommelier. He's a brilliant guy. Lives up in the Seattle area. And he called, and he says, look, maybe you understand what I'm saying now, maybe you don't, but it may take a while for it really to seep in what you've accomplished. And don't rush yourself. Allow it to hit you when it hits you. And he was right. It took over a year before it really hit me, because it's sort of a world when you pass this thing, and then you go, okay, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Right.
Well, I was really young. I was 28 when I passed. To have achieved that at such a young age, you have 2 choices, which is like, you could pretty much try to be like the high school kid wearing the varsity jacket around all the time, or you can recognize and go, well,
mine doesn't fit.
I've got a whole life ahead of me, and I've got to decide what's next. What am I going to challenge myself with next? And that was, unfortunately, I think I rushed maybe too quickly into that, and I didn't sort of take a little time to just enjoy. And I remember I went to work the next morning.
Yeah,
I was at the computer at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was at the desk like going, and I remember Sabato Sagaria, who's a master sommelier as well, really, really brilliant, restaurant executive. And he walked in, he was the director of food and beverage at the time, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm hungover as all high hell, by the way.
Yeah,
We've been out drinking till 3
Yeah, I'm sure. That's how you celebrated.
Yeah, my eyes are crossed, and I'm at the computer just, getting ready for inventory sort of thing. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Well, I'm working." He goes, and he had passed, by the way. So he knew it the cycle that I was going through. He's like, "How you feeling? Like, you're okay?" I was like, "Oh, I'm great. And I was just sort of sitting there. And I think he was really concerned. He's like, "Carlton," he's like, "Why don't you go home and just go and relax for a couple of days?" Like, he knew, like, you sort of go through these peaks and valleys of emotions and things like that. But I think a year later, it really hit me, and I was like, man, that's pretty cool. I did that. You know? Yeah.
So I guess let's go fast forward to where you're at now. How the hell did you get here? I mean, Heitz Cellars, I mean, this is iconic.
Yeah. I mean, it's so it was sort of by happenstance. I never aspired to run a winery, to run wineries. It was just never something I really considered. I was on that track. And I met the Lawrence family in Aspen, and we really hit it off. And we connected over wine first, and drinking wine and enjoying each other's company, because they're a fantastic family, and I enjoyed them as people, as I still do. Like good, solid people. The kind of people I was like my grandmother, hardworking, genuine, no fluff. You're talking to a human kind of person, you know?
Yep.
And we hit it off, and then we started the conversation about the wine business, and as you know, the wine industry, the wine business is multi-layered, so it depends on what part of the business. And they're completely different industries. And we started talking about that, and the family is really rooted in agriculture in the South and Midwest. And so there was a particular interest in viticulture, in vineyards, and we spent some time talking about it. And he says, "Well, I'm gonna look around in Napa and see if there's anything." His daughter, Weston, was going to the CIA and lived here, and he's like, "Well, this would be a great thing for me to be able to spend more time out there with my daughter." And because they're
buy a winery.
Well, they're very close. Well,
Right,
the initial thing was not to buy a winery; it was just to buy a small vineyard.
Yep.
So it'd be like a hobby vineyard,
and a couple acres, whatever it is, 10 acres, whatever it is. Yep.
Yeah, it would just, it was like he could spend time with his daughter. It's a very close family, and I was like, that's great. And as he was out here and sort of poking around, a couple of things popped up, and I was like, no, and then he called. He's like, "Carlton, look, this is really." I had signed an NDA before we had the conversation. I'm like, wow, this must be serious, because we'd never had an NDA.
So
before,
going for a nice little easy, weekend getaway at, the family ranch with maybe a couple acres, and maybe, you got someone to, bottle the grapes, 10, 20 cases a year, whatever.
Goes
some like 5 freaking wineries and another one in France.
Well, it goes really fast. And I flew down to Arkansas, and we spent a few days just drinking great wine, as we always did. And we started talking about Heitz, and I was like, wow, I mean, Heitz, and we did was we really just started talking about what we loved about it, and frankly, there was very little that we said that we didn't love, which is a really good sign. But I think we both knew it was a lot to chew off, right? I mean, it's an iconic estate, but with that comes an enormous amount of responsibility not to screw it up, right?
Absolutely.
And you actually have to make it better. You have to try to make it better, right? Because if you're not the family, then there's a microscope on you that didn't exist at the family. That now, you're the new owner. You've got to do even more with it, or at least attempt to. And so when he bought it, I said, "Look, you should," because I also believe in the family and their values. I knew they would be great owners. They don't believe in running things like corporations, and they have much longer term investment strategy. You're talking about a minimum of 60 years is how we look at every investment. So when you look at it through that lens, you're not making
how many years?
60, a minimum, is how we look at every investment.
What is he, Walt Disney? He's going to live forever? Or?
Well, it's not for him. It's for multi-generational. And that's the thing.
That's impressive. 60 years.
Yeah, that's how we look at every investment. And that's everything from what we do here in Napa to Chateau Lascombe. And
great property.
What that said is that's a differential between corporations that it's not their fault. It's the way they're literally financially structured is they're looking at quarterly earnings.
Well, this is not. How quickly are we going to reap, our investment? And unfortunately, and it's funny because you guys, the Lawrence family, kind of started the kind of trend for Napa wineries to be bought up. I mean, from after you guys, there's been Frank family, Schaefer,
the list goes on.
Phelps. I mean, I can keep going on, and you're my 8th interview since I've been here. And what I will tell you from some of the old guards that have been around for years and what have you, and smaller wineries than this, is that they see Napa changing and they're not liking it. And it seems to me, just from doing some research on the family and yourself and what have you, you're trying to just not slide in, like just kind of make it fit like you've been around for a long time and you're not really changing. It's not like, oh, hey, we're going to make worse wine, produce more and charge more. And, because unfortunately.
That's what happens a lot. Yeah, look, we see it. I mean, my dad used to always say like a lot of lessons you can learn in life or what not to do. And it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to do it. You don't have to make a mistake yourself, and you watch and you go, and it's not necessarily a mistake. It is literally how they're financially structured, the companies. So once you decide to have that type of company and that structure, you actually don't have another option on how to operate. It's how you have to operate, because that's how they define success. We define success in a different way. For us, we value the older classical estates more than the newer estates. For us, it was, Joe Schmo who comes in, hires the same consultant that everyone uses in the Napa Valley, and uses the same 4 vineyards and tries to create some Uber Napa brand to sell to his rich friends. Yep. Well, to me, that has no value. It doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. If that's what
they want to do, that's what they do. That's fine.
They absolutely should do it. But for us, it was like, well, no, man. Like Stony Hill to me is iconic. Like that's one of the greatest estates of the world. To me, that should be put on a platform. So what do? We were really fortunate and blessed enough to be able to buy it, and we are investing a ton of money into refreshing it and bringing life into it and making sure that the wine quality is the best it's ever been. And did the same thing for Burgess, and we love the history of this place. And for us, I would agree with those. We sort of, oddly enough, look at ourselves in that same camp of the old family, because what we're trying to preserve, the way we're trying to operate, is in that ilk, where we do look at how some of the corporations must by nature operate, and it is concerning. But it also, as a business owner, it gives us a competitive edge, because what we're doing is authentic, and it's real, and it's built around a long-term strategy of producing wines that are elegant and classical and timeless. And that for us, it goes, well, if they're doing that and we're doing this, in the long term, this is what's going to win, because it always does.
So how do you captivate the younger generation? How do you captivate the millennials and all the people? I'm a little bit older than you, but the 28s to 38s, because Napa is almost kind of outpricing itself to a certain extent.
The wines are very, very expensive, and I'll say is,
not just that, but like the state, like even to get a hotel or I have a different experience because I'm in the industry like yourself, so I stay at a winery that I distribute, cottage, so I don't pay the $300 or $400 a night.
The hotel rates here are obnoxious and I would say often not worth it. When you look at the comp of any other wine region, I mean, we were really blessed to be able to buy a pretty well-known chateau in Bordeaux. I can go stay in
pretty well-known.
Yeah, like the nicest.
It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite wineries in Bordeaux.
Yeah, the wines are fantastic. Yeah,
they are.
Definitely.
I got a little bit left in my cellar. It's nice.
Oh, we lucked out there.
Yeah.
And I can go stay in the nicest hotel in Bordeaux.
$130.
Yeah. I mean, literally, if you want the nicest room, it's $500-$600.
Yeah.
And here, I mean.
And you're looking at the air conditioning unit outside.
Yeah, and it's tough.
Look at the vineyard, Tony.
That's probably the most prohibitive. Right. Is the rooms. The great thing is they've seen that, and they just approved a large, I want to say 250 room hotel down in Napa. So there's more competition. The problem with it is when there's no competition and there's so much demand, the prices go up like crazy. Right. Now with so many hotels being developed, you're going to see competition, it'll stabilize. Yep. Calistoga Ranch burned down, half of Meadowood burned down, so you're taking away in northern Napa, that's 30% of the rooms gone.
Yep.
So everything is just, and in downtown Napa, the hotel rooms that used to be that, 100 to
El
150.
Camino.
Whatever,
El
now
Camino,
it's like,
$80 a night. It's now like $400.
Well, that's what I mean. It's crazy, So, but I think that's what needs to happen. There just needs to be more competition, right? That'll stabilize that.
American Canyon and Fairfield and Vallejo, as I like to call it, is fantastic to stay at.
No, American Canyon is where they've approved actually a pretty large development that's going to have hotel and like a town center and even some high density housing to have more of a community feel. But there just needs to be more competition. There was another hotel that was just approved. I think that's going to take over the old post office building downtown Napa. So that'll add some competition. We need probably 4 more hotels in Napa to create the competition that'll stabilize prices.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's enough wineries that have tastings and all that stuff and what have you. So that's interesting. So we do this section called Sip and Spit. It's kind of quick. It's about 7-8 questions, and it's never quick. It's supposed to be like 30-second answers, but it turns into like a soliloquy for some people.
Sure.
But before I forget, I got to mention the Cork and Taylor Wine Madness brackets are coming out open on February 28th. Don't forget to fill out your free bracket at www.challenge.com/Cork and Taylor Wine Madness. Let's see who's going to win the first ever Cork and Taylor Wine Madness. So, first question: most memorable wine experience.
Most memorable wine experience? I'd say for me, it was probably first time I went to France. I went by myself. I was driving around France in an old Peugeot that I rented, and I was in Beaune over Easter holiday weekend, which Europeans are incredibly religious when it involves days off work. So there was a 5-day weekend for Easter.
Dead quiet.
They love it. And I had the great opportunity to meet randomly Hubert de Monti.
Oh, wow.
This is obviously years ago. And he asked me, "Oh, are you here with your family?" And I said, "No, I'm here by myself just to visit the States." And he felt bad because, it's such a big family holiday that he invited me to dinner. So I ended up having dinner with Hubert de Monti and his family. And drinking, Domaine de Monti, and back then they had a brand called Deux Monti, which was Etienne and Alix, the son and daughter, their brand, and it was just a really it to me it personified the genuine hospitality that exists in the soul of like a great vigneron versus sometimes I think the way we approach it on the luxury restaurant side. It's a bit of a disconnect there sometimes.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting. If you had to pick one wine region, where would it be?
You mean of wines to drink?
No, just one wine region to drink, to visit. You can only go to one wine region. And don't say Napa. You don't have to say Napa.
No. I for me, it would probably be in the U.S. And I say that just because I've got this thing about the California coast. To me, I think it's one of the most magical places in the entire world. Mm-hmm. So for me, it'd be probably Mendocino. I like the wines. They produce very good sparkling wines, great Pinots, great Chards, even some fantastic Syrah, which is great.
So you're buying something, that's what you're saying.
No, we're not. We're actually not. I wish we would, but it's very far from our infrastructure. But I love the wines. I love the coast up there. Mm-hmm. I love the emphasis on.
You can get to the ocean in
seafood.
like 3 minutes. It's longer than that. But it's Mendocino is really, and the wines
stunning.
for the price are just.
That's what I mean. And for me, you get this mix of ocean and then the dense forest.
Yep.
And you can be in some sort of crappy cabin overlooking the shore and the coast, and it's enough. Get a fire burning. Like, to me, it's one of the most magical places in the world.
Yeah, I like that. The grape varietal that best describes you. Never been asked that, huh?
That'd be interesting. I don't know. That's a difficult thing. I would have to start by trying to understand myself. I would say probably Syrah.
Why?
Because it's a varietal that it just doesn't give up. Like Syrah,
it's resilient. It's misunderstood too. So you're saying you're kind of misunderstood.
Correct. But it's also, it's sort of like it keeps coming back in and out, but it's always just sort of around. And everyone sort of likes it, but for some reason, but it doesn't give up. It keeps going. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Someone once told me that I'm a petite Syrah grape. I don't know how to take
go
that.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Funniest, oddest, or strangest wine tasting experience?
Funniest, oddest wine tasting experience. We talked about it earlier. The wine industry is filled with a bunch of nut jobs. So, you get these things all the time. Frankly, it's just, with the people you interact with. I had a client for years that could not detect like cork taint in a wine at all, and he would drink some of the greatest wines in the world, and I would have to sit there at dinner.
Like, I can understand a mild cork taint. Like
no, I'm talking like, and drink really, really old Bordeaux's and Burgundies that were so corked, but I couldn't say anything, so I would literally sit at these dinners all the time with him, drinking like such obnoxiously corked wine, and it's like him and I having a whole bottle, and it's completely corked. And you just have to keep going. And every time,
this is delicious. This is the best vintage ever.
And every time he'd invite, because there was 80% of the wines were not. So you sort of like suffer through the 20 to get to the 80. Yeah. But this 20%, 80, you just,
80-20 rule.
Yeah, it's like an old bottle of DRC, and it's so corked and so bad. And you're just sitting there, you're like, okay, so I'm just gonna hammer back this wine. He's like, wow, you must like you're drinking it fast. Just trying to get to a bottle.
Did you ever have the nerve to tell him?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, because it was the risk was that I didn't get invited to taste the other 80%.
Yeah.
You know, and those collectors and guests are super important to, like, you know, experiencing those wines that otherwise you'd never be able to afford,
right.
And which used to be a lot cheaper and are now completely unattainable.
Yeah.
They're not millionaire wines anymore; they're billionaire wines.
Yeah,
they really are. They're, you know, you're talking about the old DRCs and old Rousseaus and old Jaillets and these sort of things that they were probably buying when they were not super expensive, and now forget about it.
My he was a retired UPS guy, but he worked in for my distribution. He delivered in warehouse. Great guy, Steve. He had this first grow. He would buy first grows in like the 80s for like $50 a bottle, and he'd buy cases of it. And he's sold wine for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's just crazy because it's just crazy how much they are now. And it's like, all right, won't be drinking that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's just, I mean, Bordeaux is a little bit easier just because I think, I mean, you look at the value you can get once you leave the first grows for the quality, and there's so much volume. Burgundy is just, I mean, and rightfully so. You know, they worked for a very long time without getting the recognition for what they were doing, and now a lot of those guys are rich, and they sort of deserve to be. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One word to describe the Master Somm exam.
Brutal. It's when you think about it, it's really brutal.
I mean, how many people that you know have passed have failed it?
Almost all.
Yeah. So no one's ever got it on the first time.
Oh, they have, but there's very few.
Yeah.
There's very
small
few.
Percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends who, before they passed, took it 7, 8, 9 times. Yeah, I don't know if I would have had that in me, but
brutal. Wow. Okay.
It is brutal, man, because you're looking at something that completely consumes your life. It has to, and to keep going back, to get punched in the face like that over and over again. Yeah, it's tough.
Try being married with kids. Keep coming back. No one cares about Dad the donkey.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. Biggest misconception regarding sommeliers?
That we know everything about wine. I think when you look at consumers and guests, you pass the Master Somm exam, or if you're a floor sommelier, it is that assumption that you really, these guys, they must know everything. It's like you really don't. It's the world of wine is so vast, and when you look at just the geological and viticultural aspect of wine, you have people who work vineyards their entire lives and they don't fully understand them, right? So there needs to be a desire to pretty much make it your life's work to continue learning. Mm-hmm. Right? People always ask, like, okay, well, you pass the Master Somm exam, like, what do you study? I'm like, I actually probably study deeper now than I ever have. At night, my girlfriend's always reading books, and a lot of times, like, I'm online reading, papers about viticulture and things like that, and about rootstocks, and and reading geology books, and looking at the history of farming, those sort of things. You go even deeper, and you only have so many years in your life, and so many vintages to observe, to learn. By the time you're actually probably fairly knowledgeable, you're pretty close to death.
Yeah,
it's true.
Positive thoughts with the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. Holy shit!
It's sort of like it's when you're on this side of the industry, it is a big wake up call in the sense of how little you know, and every year, it's crazy. You get one shot, and you get that shot, and you learn so much. Then you have to wait until the next year. Try to do it again. You only have so many vintages.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to be looking at any mirrors anytime soon. Well, there's a couple behind me. They're probably looking at the back of my head. All right, you get to pick 3 wines you can drink the rest of your life. What are those 3 wines?
Okay. I would say not about price or doesn't matter. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'd say for it's one of my favorites. People make fun of me, but I love Côte Sancerre. I think that it has this sort of minerality and unctuousness of really good Chablis, but more florality, more the aromatics are a little bit more exotic, It's not the sort of modern, really sort of grassy and really lean Sancerre. It's richer. It's got meat on the bones, and I like it with age. I'm the guy who's like scouring the auction market for old Sancerre.
Yeah, cool. That's one.
Gonon Saint Joseph. I think when you taste that wine, to me, it's one of the greatest expressions in the world of a grape in a place where it couldn't be anything else. To me, it's and that's really when you look at what we try to do is in wineries often is you're trying to encapsulate like the soul of a place in the bottle as much as possible. Very difficult to do. And that wine like nails it so often.
Yep.
And when you try that, their Vieille Vigne cuvée from the old Trola vines, it is one of the purest wines that you could ever just drink. To me, it's just it's a stunning wine.
Wow. Number 3.
And I'll for sake of this, I will take it out of Napa, so I don't seem like I'm being there's favoritism there. There's a number of wines in Napa that I really love, but I think I'll venture outside. I'd say in Burgundy it'd probably be Rousseau Chambertin. It's a wine that it's just great. You know, like you look at wines that have off vintages, which happens to every region and producer in the world. They happen. You're dealing with nature. Never had an off vintage of Rousseau Chambertin. The wine is always great.
Yeah, but isn't that the truth? And I've had this with other winemakers, is if it's a good winemaker, they'd practice good vineyard practices and all the things. It might not be the greatest wine they've ever made, but it's always consistent.
Yeah, no, and that's what you try to venture to do is it also helps sometimes with those estates to have a declassing mechanism so that you say, okay, look, the vintage was not great, but what I'll do is I have a commitment to bottling only great wine under this vineyard, this label. So we're just to make a whole lot less of it. And that's when you see in Burgundy sometimes you'll have someone who has like a Gevrey Chambertin Premier Cru, Gevrey Chambertin like Village, where they'll declass things down to make sure that, you know, because we have to remind people is if someone's spending that much money for a bottle of wine, they really don't care that you had a bad vintage. The wine is still expensive, so it needs to be really good / great depending on the price point. So I think those producers have just made a commitment to only bottle great wines under those vineyard names. And they typically have a declass mechanism where, you know, if a lot isn't, you know, cut into mustard, then it doesn't go in the bottling. And that's really important. I think farming, having really a true connection with your vineyard helps because you can be very reactive in the vineyard. You can sort of look at the weather and you know what you need to do to get the quality you need. You can make adjustments. You know, farming is very much like the whole Mike Tyson philosophy where everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. Where we go in with budgets and strategies for farming plans, and really you're always sort of in like we call like the tennis ready stance, just waiting for nature to, you know, okay, what are you going to give me? Because then you've got to respond. And while there's some things that you cannot quickly change to have an effect, there are some things in farming you can change like that, and it'll give you the quality, you know, you really need. So it's a lot. So I respect how difficult it is to produce a wine that's super high quality year in, year out. And I think that's the wine that I've never had a bottle where I said, must have been a bad year. You know, like you can look at the vintages that are probably not as popular in Burgundy, 04, 2011, you know, these are sort of leaner vintages, maybe a little bit greener. The wine's still great. And to me, it's like, if you give me those 3 wines at a table, endlessly, I've got enough variety, I'll be very happy.
Yeah. So what's the one wine in Napa?
In Napa, I'd say one wine. I'd say the one wine that I think it continuously inspires, I think, the work that we do. And I'd say probably consistently my favorite winemaker in the history of Napa Valley. It's Kathy Corson.
Oh, I've had her on the podcast.
Yeah. She is by far the most recognized,
absolutely
under-awarded, underappreciated winemaker probably in American history. When you look at what she's contributed to. Why do you think that is? One, because she's a woman.
Second, I think she was the second
one. I think also
female winemaker in Napa. I think she was
post-prohibition. Yeah. In why I love her is she'll go, well, I don't know about pre-prohibition, so I'm not going to claim that I'm the first. Because Because she's just not a bullshitter, right? She's like, well, I don't know that, you know. So most people would love to just take the crown. Yes, I'm the first. It's not her way. That's what I love about her. She's also not. She's not a flashy.
She's not a self-promoter either.
No, she lets her wine speak for her. And the problem is, in the old world that works. For some reason, in Napa, that has not been enough.
No.
You know, we talked about with Joe Heitz. He was a big believer where he was fairly outspoken, but he was, you know, he said, let the wine speak for you. It's not enough. And I'm glad to see that she's finally starting to get her flowers. But I mean, look at the contribution. Look at the wine she made up at Chapelet. Look at me. Yeah. She's been doing it for so long, right? At such a high level. And she was championing balanced elegant wines of Napa before it was anyone else was really talking about that. And she didn't get, you know, you had the wine critics of the day that I would say probably secretly loved her wines, but, you know, decided to score other higher priced wines more and
higher alcohol too.
Yeah, but go back and taste her wines. In the height of the modern era, when we look at the mid 90s, early 2000s, she was making some of the most brilliant wines. Try in 97, when everyone made these massive monstrosities of wine, try her 97. Mm-hmm. Any of them. They're brilliant wines. And to me, I don't care much about fluff because I have to trust my palate. I taste the wine and I go, that's, you know, she always talks about, she had a wine in her head. I'm not a winemaker.
Right.
So I take inspiration from what I taste and I say, okay, well, you know, that's the direction. You know, that's what I do. And sometimes we have regions where I don't think there's a good example of a classical wine. So we've got to sort of conjure in our mind, what does that look like here? But I think for anything we're doing sort of Valley Floor to Michelin, like in my opinion, that is the greatest wine made in the Valley Floor. Is that? I mean, there's the Tokalons, and I think the wine she is making is better than any wine made from Tokalon today. And you can quote me saying that, and the people that are in Tokalon will probably agree with you. Quietly,
it's
a fact. It's a fact. Anyone in this valley will agree with that.
Yeah.
Ask anyone. Is Kathy Corson from any one of her vineyards, Kronos, Sunbasket, currently making wines better than anyone making wine in Tokalon today? The answer is yes, she is, and it's just not an argument. But somehow those wines are 3, 4, 5 times her wines. Why is that?
Yeah, it's funny because she was my back then was one of my most nervous and nerve-wracking interviews because I didn't know her.
Yeah.
She's not. She's a wonderful lady, very wonderful, but she's not like outwardly abundant of energy. You know what I mean?
She's
like
super intimidating.
Yeah, and
it's intimidating because she closed.
I think I even called her Mrs. Corson.
Yeah.
But someone said Mike Triola, who knows her well, and that they go way back, and he said, ask her. And I'm like, I'm not gonna ask her, and I might have. Ask her why her wines are all under 14%. Why can you make a good cab with a wine under 14%, something like that? I'm like, I'm not asking that.
Oh, yeah.
She's gonna rip my head off.
She probably would say, "Well, you tell me. You've tasted the wines."
Yeah, I think I'll shut up now.
And I think what's intimidating. It's not how she presents herself. It's just when you actually acknowledge the contribution that she's made to the Napa Valley. You can't. I mean, how can you not be intimidated?
Yeah.
Right. It's like you're amongst like American winemaking royalty, and it's like you're sitting at a table. I always tell people I don't care about celebrities. I care about people who do something incredibly well and better than anyone else.
Yeah.
Right. I've been very blessed to meet LeBron James on a number of times.
Who's that?
Well, guess what? Let me tell you. I'm not intimidated because he's a celebrity. I'm intimidated because he's the greatest to do what he does in the world. That's crazy to me. Right?
We're talking about LeBron James.
Yeah, I have
Akron,
so much
Ohio.
Correct, Akron,
Ohio.
Strong.
I know some
Akron
people
strong.
that call him Uncle LeBron.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one of my son's really good buddies is
like a dream uncle.
Drew Joyce. Joyce is actually a friend of ours. Him and his wife. And I've never met LeBron. I've been. Yeah. I don't know if I've been to like birthday parties for like his Drew's family and stuff like that, and baby showers and what have you, and know a lot of his kind of crew or what have you. But LeBron likes good wine.
Yeah, but it's not because he's a celebrity.
But you meet him and he's just he's an everyday guy, right?
Yeah, but you're going this man has committed his life to doing something at a level that no other human in the history of this thing has really achieved, and he's still doing it well. Mm-hmm. And when you meet Kathy, you're like, wow, like how many years has she just been making great
She's consistent
wine?
every year.
And here we are, like we're really fortunate. We have so many great winemakers we work with, but we're all really young and we have so many vintages ahead of us where you would just like, we talked to our winemakers, like, man, if you could just have half the career that she's already had, you know what I mean? Like that would be a huge success. But for some reason in Napa, like that's not enough. You know, it's like you look at her wines and you look at, again, you just drive down the road a few miles and the prices are going up 4 times. You're like, what? Like, are we tasting the same wines?
Yeah.
Her wines are, you taste them, it's like,
I know.
the florality that she conjures out of Cabernet. It's like,
yeah.
I mean,
she gets it and finds it somewhere. It's remarkable.
It's like the Gonon. It's like a fingerprint of a wine that you can't emulate. You can't do that in Bordeaux. It can only happen there. Mm-hmm. To me, this is what we're trying to achieve. So it's like, all right, great. She's done it for so long.
Mm-hmm. So you're a fan of Kathy Corson.
Massive.
Yeah, it sounds like. All right, so we're gonna end it here. We're gonna do a little fun bonus. We want to talk about quickly about NOMAD and hockey, and then also Somm just quickly. But Carlton, thanks so much for inviting me into Heitz Cellars, and hopefully you can let me try some wine when we're done, because this is actually one of the first interviews I haven't had wine, and it's actually kind of nice. I'm not complaining. I always like to taste.
Well, then you got these people, listen to. That's always the thing when I have like wine podcasts where people are tasting. It's like I'm driving, I'm like, I don't want to listen to you.
Yeah,
like,
the best is when they're spitting and the spit's going all down their face and stuff.
But
like
you can just hear, like, I don't want to hear you doing that when I'm driving my car. Yeah.
So, but no, thanks so much. Just remember to follow, subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast provider. If you're going to give us a 5-star review, don't give us 4, 3, 2, 1. Just don't leave it. We like only 5-star reviews. And my son's given me one. My daughter. My wife, she doesn't know about that, but she gave me one. I think I gave my one myself somehow. But anyway, do that. Follow us on YouTube. And then also to look at Silvadore Brands and check out the Cork and Taylor Wine Madness Unchallenged, because that's going to be a lot of fun. We've got about 24 of our previous guest wines going at it to take the illustrious Cork and Taylor Wine Madness Trophy. We'll be back next week on the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. And as always, keep drinking the good stuff.